one of the outcomes that is specific to grade 7 in BC is being able to calculate the volume and surface area of a cylinder. Now, this isn't covered in our Jump Math book because it's not required for all of the different provinces. So we are going to focus in specifically on cylinders for this lesson. Now, for today, we'll learn how to calculate volume and surface area. You will get practice with a worksheet, and tomorrow you are going to show that you can do this by making a video of you calculating the volume and surface area of a cylinder. So I know you'll be writing with your finger, but watch what I'm doing carefully so that you can see how to do that with Explain Everything. Because it is easier. So if you want to write volume or just V at the top, then you would draw your cylinder. I might give you a specific, like, here is what the dimensions should be. So on this cylinder, the distance from the center to the edge, which is called the radius, is 3 centimeters. And the height of the whole cylinder is 6 centimeters. We only need 2 numbers to calculate the volume of the cylinder. So, what is the volume of any prism? What formula do we use to calculate the volume of any prism? So, we know that the volume for any prism, and a cylinder is a prism, is area of the base times height. Now, area of the base. What shape is the base of a cylinder? So, the area of the base is a circle. What is our formula for the area of a circle? So, the formula for the area of a circle is pi r squared, and then we times it by height. So, the volume for a cylinder is going to be pi r squared times h, okay? You can put in multiplication signs if you would like. You can squish them all together. This is the same thing as pi times r squared times h, okay? So now in our next line, we're going to put the information that we know. So what is pi? What number do I use? 3.14 times, what do I use for r? 3 squared, because I'm going to keep that to the power of 2, times, what is the height? Times 6. Now, if I think about order of operations, what step do I need to do first? So first we'll do the exponents. So we'll write everything else out the same. 3.14 times, now 3 squared is the same thing as 3 times 3, which is 9 times 6, right? And now I can just multiply all of these. So if you want to use a calculator for this, that's fine. I can also do it by hand by going 9 times 6 is 54. So 3.14 times 54 is about 169.5. So it is 169.56 centimeters. And what do I put after centimeters if this is volume? Cubed, which is the same thing as a little 3, an exponent of 3. So these are the steps to calculate the volume of a cylinder. So these are the steps you would follow in your video to show how to calculate the volume of a cylinder. I flip back, but the difference is that there is a squared in the volume. The second thing we're going to go through is surface area. So I've drawn a new cylinder with slightly different dimensions. So to start us off, we're actually going to draw this as a net because I find that sometimes easiest. So we'll take a rectangle because remember when you made your cylinders, it was a rectangle with two circles, right? So for each circle, the area of a circle is, so each circle is pi r squared, and the circles are exactly the same, right? So we could actually have like 2 times pi r squared, and then we'll need to add on the formula that we're going to use for the rectangle. Now, this rectangle here, the top and the bottom are the same distance as going around the circle, right? So what do we call the distance around a circle? We call it circumference. And our formula for circumference is, it is 2 pi r, or pi times diameter. Now, the other dimension of the rectangle going up and down is the same as the height, right? So it would be circumference times height, or 2 pi r times height. So we'll notice this looks kind of similar to our formula from before, and we do not have a squared in the surface area one. So we'll have two components for our surface area. It will be the two circles, which is 2 times 2 pi r squared, plus the rectangle, which is 2 pi r h. Okay? Now, we're going to start copying this out, and we will need to see what are we going to replace some of these with. So instead of pi, I will put 3.14, and instead of r, I'm going to put, so for radius, we'll use 4 and leave the squared because this is our radius, the distance to the edge. Now, if I look at the second half, I've got 2 times, so we already know pi is 3.14. We already know r is 4. What would the h be? So our height is 5, so that's what we would use there. Now we're going to start filling in certain pieces together. So we would start with our exponent. So we'll start with our exponent, and 4 squared is 16, and then we'll put the rest in here. Now you'll notice that I have brackets around the two sections because I don't want them to get too mixed up, right? So what could I multiply next for my next row? So I could start with 2 times 3.14, and that gives me 6.28 times 16. Oh, I forgot my multiplication sign there earlier. Plus, why don't we just use that same one again? 6.28 times 4 times 5. I could then do 4 times 5. So everything else will stay the same. 6.28 times 16 plus 6.28 times 20. And then I could do these last two sets of multiplication. So 6.28 times 16 is 100.48 plus 6.28 times 20 is 125.6. And now I can add these both together. And that should give me about 226.08. And before we finish, we need to make sure we have the centimeters squared because this is surface area. So our surface area would be 226.08 centimeters squared. So on your worksheet, you are going to get a page that has a whole bunch of cylinders on it. The instruction for every question is to calculate the volume and the surface area, okay? So one side says surface area, the other says volume. We're just going to calculate both for the one shape that we have here to practice before I let you go with your worksheet. So we're going to start with volume, and our formula for volume is pi r squared times h. I start by putting in or substituting what I know. So pi becomes 3.14, r squared becomes 2 squared, and h becomes 7. First I'm going to solve the 2 squared, so I'll still have 3.14, and 2 squared is 4 times 7. So our next step is to multiply all of these numbers. So we're going to figure out 3.14 times 4 times 7. This gives us 87.92 centimeters cubed, because remember for volume it is cubed. Now we finished volume, so we're going to look at surface area. So what is my formula for surface area? We'll have 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. So now we substitute what we know. So we keep the 2, pi is 3.14, r squared is 2 squared. 2, pi becomes 3.14, r becomes 2, h becomes 7. So we're going to solve for our exponent. So the only thing that's going to change is the 2 squared will become 4. And then we'll write everything else that's in our brackets. My next step is to do all the multiplication that's in the brackets. So I'm starting with 2 times 3.14 times 4. So our first bracket is going to become 25.12, plus our second bracket is going to become 87.92. What's my final step? So that gives us 113.04 centimeters squared. So these are the steps for calculating volume and surface area.